All right, I'd like to call to order this planning and zoning meeting on May 28th, 2024. The time is 6:03 p.m. Can I get a roll call, please?
Ritchie.
Here.
Mormon.
Here.
Piper. Becker. Waterman. Here. Nate. Vice.
Here.
Darling. And Ferris.
Here.
Thank you. And then the first item on the agenda would be approval of the May 28th agenda. If anyone would like to make a motion.
A motion to approve the May 28th agenda.
Thank you. Anyone have second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Same sign. Okay, we'll move on to the meeting minutes approval for April 23rd, 2024. If anyone would like to make a motion on that.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Same sign. All right, and we will now open the floor for public comment. This would be anyone that would be here to speak on an item that's not on the agenda. All right. Doesn't look like we have any old business, so we'll move on to new business. Item 7A, consider recommendation on amendment to section 165.06 zoning regulations, site plan regulations, and procedures of the Code of Ordinances of Indianola, Iowa.
So really quick, I'm going to introduce Chris Shires. Chris Shires is our consultant with Confluence who's been working on our code updates. I know you guys, some of you have been here during the sign code and the zoning code update that we've done. So this is kind of step 3 in that process. Alongside this, there's been some legislative changes that happened at the State House this year that are driving the first 2 items that are on our agenda here that we'll go over. But there's 5 different items in total. What we'll do is kind of talk about each one of them individually, discuss them rather than do all of them at the same time. I think that's just better if we kind of go through each one of these individually and answer any questions and then do the motion seconds and votes and all that stuff on them. So I'll hand it off to Chris and if there's any questions, we can help answer them.
Right, Charlie, thank you so much. Let's start out with the first one, all about a little tweak we need to make to your site plan regulations related to, as Charlie said, a few little changes our state legislators want us to react to. And this hopefully will not be as much fun as our sign code discussion many years ago. So it's great to be back in front of you. So one thing that did occur, and it's in your packet, we did have a code change at the state level restricting what level of stormwater management and topsoil preservation or topsoil requirement we can have. So we did need to go back and update the stormwater regulation section of the site plan ordinance. In essence, just striking through the text with the strike through language that we're instead of saying the storms calculated at the pre-developed state, it's at the current status. And that's in greenfield developing on a farm field, there's really no change. It'll really come into play on those few occasions when you're going to see a redevelopment of an existing site. And let's say that existing site in downtown or another spot in city does not have current stormwater, or the stormwater doesn't meet the current standard. We in essence can't go back and say, go from a undeveloped kind of farm field state to detain at your new status. And then we wanted to just acknowledge, because there'll probably be a little bit of rulemaking or some interpretations or maybe a court case or two that we're referring back to that section of that new section of code that preempts us. And so hopefully this is pretty straightforward, but we can go into kind of any details if you want.
Just curious where this came from.
Well, I mean, I'll say it.
League of Municipalities or the construction industry?
The home builders. There was maybe a couple of cities that had some pretty stringent rules. And so this is a pushback against that, which is actually a good thing for us to remember. If we maybe go too far, there always can be the backlash.
Yeah, and I'll just add to it. There's few cities in the metro that had some pretty stringent regulations that Chris mentioned. And then there was a legislator who is a home builder in the Quad Cities that also was I think, the key sponsor to this bill that had some issues with some cities in the Quad Cities. So again, yeah, like Chris mentioned, there's 3 cities maybe that were regulating a little bit above and beyond what most in the state were. So yeah, just to be frank, those 3 cities are now making the other 974 suffer with new regulations. So
And I think in most situations, it's not really going to impact what you're doing. You didn't have a top soil standard. And in most cases, it's developing greenfield. And so there's no impact. The big impact is those redevelopment sites where maybe there's an issue or a downstream issue. But that, downstream owner can always decide to sue based under Iowa drainage law. So.
So do you need a recommendation?
yeah, so technically, yep, this is a change to our zoning code. So
I would move approval or recommend approval to the city council. I assume they have to approve it,
Yep.
even though it's state law.
correct.
So did you want us to go through each one? and-
No, yeah, let's do, yep, just what we're doing. So Al's got a motion.
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Harris,
Yes.
Mormon,
Yes.
Weiss,
Yes.
Waterman,
Yes.
Ritchie.
Yes.
Right, we'll move on to 7B, consider recommendation on amendment to section 165.09 zoning regulations, building design standards of the Code of Ordinances of Indianola, Iowa.
Okay, another bill passed this year also preempts cities from having design standards for residential. This may be another one that next year or in 6 months, or if there's a court case or an administrative ruling of some sort, we might have to do some additional tweaks because it's not written terribly clear. And so, but as we think we understand it, no exterior building design standards for single family, townhomes, duplexes, row houses, apartments up until they get over 13 dwelling units in a building. And then you can go back to having building exterior design standards. So what we've done is gone back to our little section where we talk about building design standards. Ag, we had nothing. Single family, we had very little. We really just saying you have to use recognized building materials. We wanted to make sure we didn't conflict in the code. So we're recommending that section just be deleted. And then the big changes, horizontal attached. So that's the term we have for townhomes, row houses, those types of units. So where you have somebody could be living side to side, front to back of you, but nobody living above or below. Just delete all that exterior material language. Still have the requirement, for a functional porch, patio, deck, rooftop patio, something like that. And that we want that each individual unit to have some kind of change to its facade, but we have had to leave it a little bit more generic. Not talking again about anything related to exterior building materials. And then same thing for vertically attached. It's our fancy way of saying apartments. If it's 12 units or fewer, we deleted out all the exterior material requirements, but we still have, the functional outdoor space, patio, deck, things like that, breaking up the facade somehow, but not saying anything about building materials. And then when we get to apartment buildings individually over 13 units per building, that's where we left it alone. I think this is probably not as substantial of an impact to you. We weren't doing anything on single family houses anyway. It's pretty rare that an apartment building isn't more than 13 dwelling units within a building itself. The big impact is, really no design standard for townhomes, row houses. So I think that was all for that one. So any questions about that? Okay.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
Al, none of us like it, I promise.
Huh?
I said none of us like it, I promise you.
No.
Yeah, so let me go back to that. So basically, you're not classifying what they have to use for material, so they can use a number of different things.
Or it could just be all vinyl or all hardy plank or all whatever they want to do.
And that's
As long as it's a recognized exterior building material.
It could be the same on 12 in a row.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, it's
So
coming-
much for local control.
Yeah, that comes from the state then.
Yeah.
So they're making us get rid of that.
Yeah. It's,
They're preempting us, yeah.
yeah, this section of state code where it talks about city zoning, it keeps getting longer on the exemptions. So, yeah,
It's like what Charlie said, it's also a reaction to some cities that had gone so stringent that it was really negatively impacting affordability.
what I was really concerned with, and I was glad they did the 13 or more units, we could still have standards, because I know it's really hard for us to get apartments approved. You know, when they come before you, when the neighbors kind of go crazy and are concerned about that, and people will die, right? So we tend to try to get some, we'll make them look really nice and, you know, try to kind of appease them. And so at least we can still do that on the bigger buildings. Okay,
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Weiss,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Waterman,
Yes.
Mormon,
Yes.
Ritchie.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to 7C. Consider recommendation on amendment to the subdivision regulations of chapter 170 of the Code of Ordinances of Indianola, Iowa.
all right. Now this one's a little more substantial. This is a repeal and replace. We did some pretty decent rewriting. From a big picture standpoint, we didn't change anything terribly fundamental other than a little bit on the process, and I'm going to go through that. And then we made sure that our language also complies with the stormwater regulation changes. Because obviously we have to do that for subdivisions. And so if you're going to, you know, create a new lot of record, we have a process, do a full subdivision, do a change to a subdivision, move lot lines. It's really about cleaning up, making sure it's really clear what that process requirement is, what the standard are. So we worked closely with AP and Public Works to make sure we have the design standards up to date. We're referring back to the statewide SUDAS standard, that everything's up to date as far as, you know, the erosion control requirements for meeting our stormwater permit at the state level, how we're doing fees, and even making sure that we're being very fair on allowing bonding, performance bonds for subdivisions that want to jump ahead and get recorded, but they don't have all their infrastructure in place yet. That is very common and typical. Want to make sure that's all in place to allow that. How we accept public improvements. And then even when we deal with the county for our 2-mile extraterritorial review, that we have a little bit of flexibility to look to our future land use plan and say, hey, this isn't an area that we're ever really going to see any development or foresee annexing. We can defer our authority to the county. But we make that on an decision on an individual one-by-one basis. But I want to talk a little bit about the procedures. There is still, and we're confirming, a pre-application process. So before you're going to submit an application, we want you to come in and meet with city staff. Tell us what you're wanting to do. We go through, review, and then talk through your process. For you, there's the commission. You'll still be reviewing preliminary plats and then making a recommendation that goes on to city council. That's a really big deal. So we're really valuing preliminary plats as being all the heavy lifting. We need all the engineering, the detail, how this is going to work. And then once that gets approved by city council, the developer can rely on that preliminary plat to say, okay, I know now I can draw up my construction plans, get those approved by Public Works, start my construction process. And then it's more of a functionary legal step to come back in to get the final plat for all or a portion of that preliminary plat to have lots of record ready for sale. So for council review, they're of course receiving your recommendation on the preliminary plats and taking action. They're taking the final plats, accepting those legal documents and confirming that it's in accordance with the preliminary plat and approving them. And in certain cases, minor replats. And then there are some situations we spelled out where it can be administrative, that the zoning official can approve a plat of survey that's either doing a lot line adjustment or only creating another lot of record, trying to keep it really, really simple. Because there's a lot of scenarios when I just need to move this lot line. It's an easy record, or I need to split off a homestead lot, you know, for my farm. Don't want to make people go through a big, long process. Now, happy to go in detail if there's another section of the code of this draft that you want to go through in greater detail. But from a fundamental standpoint, it's a little bit of reordering, clarifying, updating, and just making sure our standards all kind of track following the statewide design standard of SUDAS. Now,
On page 49. Or it's,
What's the bottom one say?
no, it's C, at the bottom of C. Review by planning commission. It says before reviewing a preliminary plat, the notice of commission's meeting shall be given to property owners within 200 feet of the plat and sending notices to affected property owners by first class mail and posting notices of the tract. I thought we recently changed that so that it was going to be up to the developer to do that.
No,
This
that,
is not consistent with that.
that
is
was
it?
that was on rezonings that we did that about the posting
Just on
notice. Yep,
rezone.
Yep.
So why don't we do the same thing here?
Well, so
Why do we have two separate procedures?
So we say you either have to send mail to everybody within 200 feet or post notices on the track. It's not both, it's or. So it gives us the option to do that. We've always done mailings in the past. It's easier for us to do that, and we are assured that people typically will see mailings a little bit
Okay,
faster.
so the city's gonna do it here, but in the other one, the posting,
The other one, we still mail, and we require the
Okay.
applicant to post the notice on the rezoning.
okay, fine. I thought we were being
Yeah.
inconsistent.
No, I appreciate you pointing that out. I had to go back and look at it too, but yeah, I think that's the intent. And again, this is language I believe that was carried over from our existing code. We just didn't think it was worth changing that because it does provide a little bit of flexibility.
and we did really debate that as well, is that it's frankly just easier to make sure it's done right if the city sends out the letters. We're able to produce the mailing list, we're able to do it.
Since the preliminary plat, this really becomes more important, doesn't it?
The preliminary plat?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's always been important. I mean, you gotta remember this, preliminary plats are always approved and then the subdivider goes out and they'll typically start constructing everything, putting it in, and then you would always review the final plats too, but really, once you get to the final plat, the way I've always seen that is that you're essentially rubber stamping that they've done everything they said they were gonna do in the preliminary plat. So that's how we've always handled it, but I think by the commission only reviewing preliminary plats, maybe that does put a little bit more focus on you as the commission on the importance of the preliminary plats, because they are very important.
Absolutely.
Okay. Guidelines in that area?
As far as,
Well. Yeah, never mind. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comment. If I can, just because I've done a lot of subdivision plats over the years. We're getting the most amount of detail literally with that preliminary plat document. It has the grading master plan, stormwater management plan, all the utilities, existing buildings, proposed easements, all that extra level of detail is defined in a preliminary plat. And so from a guideline standpoint, our code is very, very clear. All those different things that have to be addressed. And then we're doing our detailed review between the utilities and all the city departments. And so really, when we have the final plat document, it's really just a legal document. It's a lot less line work. It's just showing those lots and easements. And then there's some legal documents that go with it for the actual recordation.
Well, how does a plan unit development fit into that?
Yeah.
Because the way it is now, if they get approval of PUD, but if they change something, then they're gonna come back.
correct.
That's gonna stay the same?
Yep. So nothing would change in our PUD process, and even on the preliminary plat, I mean, if, and I'll just give you an example. So Quail Meadows is, Quail Meadows, when that first came to you in 2019, that edition was gonna be a third and fourth edition. They got the third one done, COVID hit, then they split the fourth edition into two editions. Well, that fifth edition, which now they're starting to plan for, the preliminary plat that was done in 2019 is no longer valid today, so now they have to go through a whole nother process to get that preliminary plat approved again. So,
But like
But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Give me a second, because I just got it back. What happened there was they had, and I don't remember the exact number, but let's say they had 16 lots left to be platted. Well, they actually made a change to add a 17th lot in there. So in that process, they have to now come back. You know, we toss that around internally. Do we make them go through another preliminary plat, or do we just say, hey, we extended the duration of approval because nothing's really changed since then? But since they added that lot in there, we felt that it was necessary for them to come back and get that preliminary plat approval again before they start developing. So any changes that would happen to a preliminary plat. So if you approved a preliminary plat at this meeting, and then a month later they said, oh, we want to take this easement away and we want to add a lot over here, they'd have to come back to you again for approval.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause-
Yeah, in the top of page 7 of 26, we actually spell that out, that modifications to approved preliminary
Yeah.
plat.
We got two different page numbers going.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, I know.
Sorry, follow mine, not theirs.
Yeah.
But, and what is common on a change or a minor deviation is you won't even know it. It'll be a bearing change, a small dimension change, as they're actually doing the fine engineering and even sometimes the staking. And so it'll be really nearly immaterial or hard for us to even catch tweaks. But it's that fundamental stuff. Easements, number of lots, basic shape, sizes, setbacks, all that stuff that can't change.
I have a question on the exceptions.
Mhm. Yeah.
Is there, I don't see anything, but maybe I'm missing it. Is there a specific amount of time that needs to lapse before a secondary, so you could, they can divide into 2 lots without going through the process? How much time has to pass before they can divide another 2 lots?
Great question. Technically, it's not time-based.
Okay,
It talks about the original tract.
okay,
And so you only get 2 splits out of the original tract. And in
okay,
fact, even state law talks about, they use kind of fancy big words to talk about the original governmental tracts.
okay.
So we don't have to even worry about a time. It's just 2.
Okay, but there's not a way, I guess that's what I was making sure, is there's not a way to like play the system?
You can always try, but no. I mean, yes, because sometimes the county does rely on cities to really enforce the platted survey rules.
Mhm.
And there is even state language that talks about the number of splits you can do.
Okay,
And this is where staff comes in, but we will know better. If you're platting a numbered lot, well, then no, you can't do that. It comes back to those original 40 sections, 40 acres sections, the quarter sections. Great question. In fact, I think that on page 8 of 26, that exceptions section's a good one to go through.
And just to add to that too, so we've had instances, so when you deal with the county and the city, where the city is the approval authority, technically the county shouldn't be recording anything until they have a resolution from the city. Well, there's been some instances that we've run into in the past where lo and behold, a survey will get recorded without our approval. And I think we've spelled it out even in these regulations. If that happens, the city does not recognize that just because it is recorded and just because the county has entered it in and just because it shows up on Beacon as a lot split, that doesn't necessarily reflect it through us because they haven't gone through the legal process to actually do that. So in an instance where something could be recorded and looks like it is a thing, and technically is from the county's perspective, they could transfer all of that stuff throughout the time after that, even if they wanted to. We don't necessarily recognize it as it. So if they were to come and say, hey, the county recorded this division and I have 2 lots now, so I want to build a house in each one, we'd be like, well, no, from our standpoint, that's still only 1 lot. So until you go through the process.
Okay.
Saves us.
Yeah.
If there ever is an issue.
And unless a judge orders it.
Yeah.
There are some exceptions.
Yeah. There's always exceptions to what we can do, yes.
Are there any other parts of this that anybody would like to have a little?
I do want to also point out, just because I know this always comes up every single time we bring plat surveys to you that are outside of our growth priority area, we do have a section in there that does give us the administrative authority to waive those from a review, so they won't even come to the planning and zoning anymore. I think the only other thing I think on the review process that I would point out that I know we added in here because we kind of went back and forth on this a little bit internally was we do have a process in here now where if we are reviewing something at the staff level and the applicant is growing impatient on our review, they can demand, for lack of a better term, that it come to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review, even if our review team has not reviewed everything. Obviously, if that ever happened, we would tell you, hey, we still have all these outstanding items. You kind of serve as the judge at that point to decide if it's ready to go to council or not at that point, but that is something else that we put in there.
Yeah, and that's a good reminder also then the same thing that staff, you as the administrator can forward it on to the commission and council's consideration as well. If it's kind of a wonky one, they'd be more comfortable you making that decision.
I think the best thing we did put in there, we called it, what do we call it? The recording party? Too. We now have a requirement too. So when subdivisions
Right.
get recorded, there's always some instances where, and if you've ever followed a subdivision process, you see the plat. The plat is accompanied by so many attachments that sometimes they're recording something that can be this thick, and one easement doesn't get included in that. And it hurts us 20 years down the road because we realized it never got recorded. So what we've done is we've set up a party, our process, excuse me. And thankfully, we're so close to the county recorder's office that it doesn't matter where we staff will actually go with the applicant or the attorney, whoever that may be, to the recorder's office together to make sure everything gets recorded as it's supposed to be. So, yeah, that helps in some instances where we've had issues, so.
I have another clarification request on either on page 21 or page 64, whichever one you want to choose. It's plan unit developments. And about halfway down, a sentence starts with, it is not the intent of this provision to lessen the number, size, and the extent or type of infrastructure improvements required, but to, where would that come into play? But to permit the reasonable and necessary modifications, design requirements in order to allow developments of subdivisions which do not utilize a conventional layout and other features.
So that's in your current code today.
Yeah.
And so we carried that over. And so as I read it, the intent is, when we're doing a PUD, we're supposed to be doing something special. That's why we can't follow our standard zoning. This is saying that just because you're doing that doesn't mean you get to pave the streets out of marshmallows. We still have to meet a design standard. We can get creative, we can try something different, but we still have to, we're not automatically saying that you get a pass on some of our subdivision design.
Thank you.
Would anybody like to make a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion to approve the, I guess it would be new site plan approval process.
All right, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Weiss,
Yes.
Mormon,
Yes.
Ferris,
Yes.
Richie,
Yes.
Waterman.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to 7D, consider recommendation on additions of chapter 171 parkland dedication to the Code of Ordinances of Indianola, Iowa.
It stopped working.
There it was.
Oh. There we go. We have to start all over. Okay, ready for me?
Mhm.
So this one's new, but it's not new to the metro. So parkland dedication requirement as a part of, which is most typical as a part of a brand new single-family subdivision, but it could come into play with a new apartment building or a new townhome or row house development. And so through your Parks and Rec master plan, you've determined that we have this ideal scenario that we're gonna have 16 acres of neighborhood parkland or parkland for every 1,000 residents. So that's 0.016 acres per resident. So as you have one of these new developments coming in, causing this new demand, we have a standard by which we want you to dedicate parkland. And it's kind of a tiered process. Ideally, number one, you deed us actual land that the city can then construct a neighborhood park. And so we're going to take what are your number of lots or dwelling units times our average household size, which is right now 2.4, to come up with how many acres, or in some cases on a smaller project, how many square feet. And so we have a couple examples, and we included them in the code to try to calculate that out. Now, here's where it gets a little more fun. In your Parks and Rec master plan, you have park service areas, nodes. And so we have language in here talking about that dedication should be within a half mile of this new subdivision or new development, because we want it to serve those people from whom the developer's having to give up some land. Sometimes that can be a little impractical. This actually takes a lot of work. It is something that the Parks Department, city will actually need to negotiate with the developer, with various landowners to actually try to assemble, instead of getting little half-acre pieces or quarter-acre pieces, to get enough land. I've typically more than 5 acres assembled all at once. We do have some minimum standards in there. It's not just floodplain land, it has to be usable land. We need street access, but there's some other things. We can give credit for somebody dedicating land that a trail is going to go on. So if it's not in the street right away, it's off on its own by deed or by easement. And then to make it a little more confusing, there will be some cases where, and often the developers actually prefer this, we already have the neighborhood park site, but we don't have a playground or basketball court or those types of physical improvements that the developer could actually physically construct or have constructed and get credit back based on that cost. So if they need to dedicate 1 acre and that acre is worth $40,000 for market value, they could make $40,000 in trail or park improvements. Met their requirement. They kind of like it because now the improvement's there right away. The other one, because the next thing we'll talk about is a stream buffer ordinance. There are certain, and it shows up on your Parks and Rec master plan as well, areas where the city may want a green belt or a buffer along an existing stream. Those are not as valuable land, and sometimes, frankly, it'd be best not to have those under a homeowner or homeowners association. Might be better to even have it under city. That if those get dedicated to the city, we have a reduced factor. So you're not getting a 1-to-1 credit. So 1 acre of green belt is only 1/10 of an acre of dedication. And then lastly, is that if the developer says, hey, can I just give you some cash instead, that the city could accept cash of equivalent value to the land dedication requirement. But then the city does need to keep track of that to make sure that cash goes back to improving rec facilities within that half mile of this subdivision or development. And this thing is sensitive. There we go. So there's some details in this. This is really common now in our metro. This is how most cities are doing it. The dedication ratio tends to be different based on whatever your Parks and Rec master plan is. And frankly, it is a negotiated process on actual dedication. So what we tend to see developers doing is more of the physical improvements. The city will actually identify or obtain a piece of land, and this is a way to get the developers to actually build some improvements. Or in some cases, we'll have the foresight to be able to work with a couple of different property owners and identify an area where they can kind of go in together on. Questions for me?
Yeah, what if a developer wants to have a park in the development, wants it managed by the homeowners association? Couldn't there be some alternative in here where they could do that, but yet an agreement with the city or some restriction that they would have to maintain it that way as a public park? It's just another alternative for them. I don't know if they would ever want to do that, but I could see a situation where maybe the homeowners association would like to have the park. And
so the short answer is yes, we can do that. In application, we tend not to see that very often because the one problem we'll run into is they have to put a public use easement over it. And so if it's a homeowners association, they tend to be rather jealous and they don't want anybody from the public coming in and using their pool or playground. We've had a little success over the years with, say, an apartment development being okay having a public use easement over, say, the playground they build on site. Because is the big thing is about, that this is providing, playground for everyone in that service area. However, there's probably no prohibition to you guys actually agreeing to it remaining private or doing this. And so, I mean, that could be a tweak. I was thinking, Charlie, we kind of went back and forth on that one a little bit.
The only thing I think, like in section 171.08, where we talk about that agreement, as you mentioned, this is a negotiation between us and developer. I mean, I think there's probably some way that we could legally get to an agreement for some
right.
situation like that to play out. But yeah, I think as Chris mentioned on this in all application, I don't know if that would ever happen, because I think most of the time those people just with the liability sometimes that parks bring to an association or to a private entity, that they would probably just want to transfer to the city anyways, so.
What I was gonna say is, from a liability and insurance standpoint, it's probably not overly likely that it would
Yeah.
happen.
But in the outside chance it does, I think we have an avenue to get there and make sure that it still meets the intent of this ordinance.
I could see a scenario if you had, say, a gated community, golf course community. I could see a scenario where they may want to have their on-site playground or park space, would like credit for that. And then through, as Charlie noted in that section 0.08, you could by agreement. There's nothing precluding you from doing that. It just wouldn't be the preferred path.
I like all of the options that are included here, so that, as you said, we don't end up with a bunch of really small, random, unuseful.
Like the tot lot on the west side.
Yeah. Yes, that got brought up quite a bit, because we put in, what was the minimum acreage that we put in here? I know we went back and forth on that a couple times. Was it 1 acre?
Some of the standards. But one, just at least 1 acre in size, that, because we went back and forth with.
Yep. With Parks and Rec on that one, but yeah, so, and that's good, something I should note is that the Parks and Rec Commission did review this, and then there's a lot of their recommendations that were built into this ordinance as well.
Is there I guess I'm looking for maybe a minimum, right? Like, if I'm only gonna put 20 houses in a development, do I then have to do a park too?
Are you saying, is there a minimum number of houses that trigger it?
Yeah,
More than 2,
Okay.
for what that's worth. And in those cases, because I've done those really small subdivisions or small developments,
yeah,
we're normally just having them build a small section of trail.
Okay.
There's always a trail that can be built somewhere.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the low hanging, easy fruit.
okay.
I'm using all kinds of little.
I think that would be the only thing, right, just from a communication perspective, so
Yeah.
people understand, like, you don't have to build a whole playground when this is what you're developing.
And the big thing is that we're tying it back to this 16 acres per thousand. We're not saying it's $100,000. It's all about the ratio of the number of people you're adding.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
There are 3 words in here that bother me.
Oh,
On page 73, under number 3.
What section is that? Sorry. Just like,
In lieu of dedicating parkland, that one?
Yeah, in lieu of dedicating parkland.
Okay.
On the second line, the words park improvements or.
for future park improvements or parkland acquisition.
I'd like to take those 3 words out. I'm concerned that money could be used to relieve the city's obligation. And so it would be a zero-sum game for parks.
If they merely improved an existing,
Well, substitute the money here for what would have been put in the budget for parks. And so you've gained nothing.
sorry, what number was that one again?
it's 171.06 and then it's 3.
We'd say basically,
Middle of
it
page
was
3.
budget for
Alternatives to
park improvements
dedication of
because they have
parkland.
all surplus money from developers.
And it's second.
And
Second sentence.
I think I see your point. if it makes you feel any better, I doubt this will ever get all that large. That maybe the council thinks, oh, I don't need to put any money into the parks budget. And I look at this as more of a capital fund. So it's not, maintenance is not operation, it is capital. And I think it could be very viable to build up a few bucks to then try to buy a piece of land. Cause and it's intended for that neighborhood. So I mean, it only happens because the neighborhood area is growing or to build a playground or something like that.
So, but your concern, let me really quick, your concern is that, let's say this fund grows so big that the city council decides, well, we don't need to fund parks anymore. So what if we were to add a sentence in here or add something in here that essentially said that funds dedicated in this manner can only be used towards new parks or new equipment within existing parks? Would that?
You're still worried about us not setting aside the money, the city council not.
I'll tell you why I have this concern, because I've seen this firsthand. If those of you who are old enough to recall, at one time we had a park user fee in this state. And what happened was the legislature cut the parks budget by the amount that was being generated out of the park user fee. And I'm concerned that the same thing could happen here.
Trying to.
So this has already been to court once, for what it's worth. We used to have a parkland dedication fee as a standard in many cities. One city, we'll blame the city of West Des Moines for that one, doubled it, went from $100 a unit, a lot, to $200. Certain group sued, won in court, but only because they're requiring a fee, which was considered an impact fee, not a clarified or not specified in state law. So cities can't tax, there's no tax the city can impose unless it says you can in state law, right? But the court ruling said that you can still require an improvement. And so this parkland dedication is an improvement based on its impact, the development's impact. So just like you can require a turning lane, you got a new Walmart, it's causing the need for a turning lane. You have your nexus there to say, Walmart, you need to build a turning lane. So that is how this applies. And so one thing I think, back to your comment, Charlie, is we could make sure that we add a phrase, something to this section, that in lieu of dedication of doing this cash payment, maybe used for future park or park improvements or land acquisitions that serve this area or serve this half-mile area. Because otherwise, you're in essence negating the fee in lieu of, or it's not a fee, the donation of cash in lieu of.
I do like that addition. I don't know that that helps with Al's concern of he wants to make sure that the money that the city should be putting aside for parks remains put aside, no matter how big this fund gets. But I don't know that that's something we can put here.
I'm not sure how to fix that, because I think I appreciate where you're coming from, but I'm not sure how to fix that with this ordinance, because I think you do want the flexibility that it could be a park improvement or land acquisition.
Within that half mile, I do like the addition of that.
Yeah, man, maybe that should help, because that's really the intent, is that, this developer's making this outlay because of the impact of this new 100-lot subdivision. There's a fairness factor there, really.
I like that too, so that the city can't just say, we're gonna use this money to fix this old park that's run down instead of putting money into that park.
Yeah.
Probably controls it a little bit better. Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm trying to make sure that there's no way like these funds ever go to like personnel or anything like that, that it is parkland. We're using it for equipment, our ground and stuff like that, so.
And the case law on this would really chastise the city for using it for anything other than park improvement to serve this neighborhood. For what that's worth.
Have faith, right?
Well, I won't tell you that.
Does anyone else have any other questions in regards to this section?
So then where does the I'm not familiar with the budgetary items, so how's that get budgeted then through four parks? Like, is that city council that does the budgets for those or?
Yeah.
Yep.
And it might take 4 or 5 years or 6 years to say, accumulate enough money to buy another park. But it's certainly better than
But then this,
not accumulating.
so then this would have, but, you know, if they built one, let's say it was just for easy, if out in Quail Meadows, they can't take that money and put it into Moats Park or something, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if we added that language, especially that we were talking about, then we'd be able to do that, yeah.
It's a try anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we can certainly, and if your motion was, we can add that language in.
That was a motion. To recommend approval with the modification.
A modification of within a half mile.
Would anybody like to second?
I'll second.
All right, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Harris,
Yes.
Weiss,
Yes.
Mormon,
Yes.
Waterman,
Yes.
Ritchie.
Yes.
All right, 7E, consider recommendation on addition of chapter 172, stream buffer protection to the Code of Ordinances of Indianola, Iowa.
All right, the last one was pretty common across the metro. A stream buffer ordinance is a little more unique. There are cities and counties that do have a stream buffer protection ordinance, but let me go through that in a little bit of detail. For certain classes of streams and then floodplains, we have identified, in fact, even in your packet, we have a map where we have streams that have mapped floodplains and floodways, I should say. Then how the USGS defines type 1 streams, which generally have water in them all the time, and a type 2 tends to sometimes have water in it. But we've kept it really simple on calculation of what an ideal buffer is. 50 feet on either side of a channel, 30 feet on either side of the channel, or 50 feet on either side of the floodway boundary. Couple of things that this can help accomplish. Number one, most importantly, protection of property. So if we today say, hey, in a new, and this really applies to new developing areas that I should kind of note. In a new area, where we're going to do a new subdivision, a new development, a new building, we want you to stay back just a minimum amount. Streams definitely do want to meander. They want to wander. We can always have massive rain events that are not, flood designated, but still can have flooding. So let's keep the properties back. The secondary impact, especially tied back to your parkland dedication ordinance we just talked about in your Parks and Rec master plan, is there's some value to these corridors. They can be wildlife habitat, they can be green buffers, they bring value to our neighborhoods, wildlife corridors to actually house trails. And so there's kind of that secondary kind of positive. So we're going to protect houses from collapsing or getting flooded by a meandering stream. So with this ordinance, it's not to say that every single stream and buffer would be dedicated to the city, actually only in limited circumstances. In most cases, they'd be set aside with a protection easement. They could still be owned by the adjoining property owners or a property owner. But we want to identify this area to be preserved and protected. It's a no-build area. And then depending on the quality of its current status, the stream may be left completely alone, or that buffer area, it may be revegetated or revegetated differently. It all depends on kind of the plan that the property owner comes up with in concert with the city. The big goal is, how do you keep it functioning the way it needs to function, to convey water, place for animals, can be a great land use buffer between dissimilar uses, make it into a positive. The other thing we are talking about in here is having that engineered analysis. So if they're already on site, doing a site plan, subdivision plat, we want to make sure that stream is stable. What we see as areas develop, we go from, especially a type 2 and intermittent stream. One of the biggest reasons why we see streams erode is water is moving constantly, even though it's just a little bit because we're detaining, it's never drying out. So streams that get water, dry out, get water, dry out, don't erode and meander as quick as the constant, I call it a nuisance trickle. And so when you develop, we may be detaining, so it's not any more than the 5 to 100-year flood event, but we're still getting that kind of constant run of water. And so that's where we can start seeing the erosion. And so that analysis, competent engineer with stormwater expertise can then make sure, is that existing stream stable? Are there some letdown structures or some armoring needed? Going forward, this will be a little bit of work, but it'll save a lot of pain in the future. I sat through many a council meeting where we were dealing with individual or 20 or 30 homeowners that all along a stream, their houses are too close, built how many years ago, and they're losing fences, structures, garages, one case, a pool. Nobody likes it, and retrofit to drag through people's backyards is incredibly expensive. So this is try to head off those future costs, bless you. So again, my big thing is, it's not that it all gets dedicated to the city, but some of them could be, depending on the city's interest for a trail. It's all really about kind of preservation and protection. So any questions on all that? We have a map to kind of show how.
Yeah, I do have a question. So it would apply to all of the area inside the dashed black line outside of the city limits?
Anything that we're reviewing a subdivision plat in.
Okay.
Yes, because we're going to treat everybody the same. So and there is some benefit to it, especially in some of these areas that have those streams. I would hope as they read it, they'd say, oh, I see the benefit to doing this. This maybe adds value to my subdivision. So that's also our hope with that. This would be, I think you guys, or Warren County is in the process of, is Middle Creek just on the north edge of the planning boundary?
Yes.
I think there's a watershed study going on for that, or will be. And so this would be a nice thing to coincide with that. And maybe something that the county wants to consider doing countywide. I don't know if they will or won't.
City council discussed that. Did they approve participation in that? I remember there was some discussion about it and a couple of council members were hesitant.
I don't recall it, honestly. I'm trying to think back to it.
Well, it's back to a previous council. Mr. Parker was still on the city council.
Okay. I don't recall, honestly.
I have a question. What if it's a development, I can just use my own residence to ask this. Lot 4 is the one that's not done yet where I live. And there is a creek through all of it. Once that gets approved, would this take effect for just the houses in plot 4?
Yes.
Who have the stream so for those of us on the other side, it wouldn't apply?
Yes.
Yeah, only going forward, the retro, in theory, if a commercial site's redeveloping, you could revisit it. But really it's when we're going from an undeveloped or natural or ag state is the time to come in and address it.
So I have a question about the impervious surfaces and, because you talked a little bit about maybe this could be an area for a future trail. So would
Right.
does that mean specifically it would have to be like a gravel trail?
Oh, that's a great question. So we tend not to think of trails having too terrible much of an impact from water runoff, but that would be about, there still is a stormwater analysis that would occur. But no, this would not prohibit doing a trail. It could still be a hard paved trail versus like permeable or gravel. You still sure could. Because that's a rec benefit that the city's acknowledging. Otherwise, you're right, we're not wanting parking lots and driveways but there will be some cases where we're gonna cross one of these with a brand new street and a culvert. And so, I mean, it's not a one size fits all, and that's why we have that management plan.
It says impervious surfaces are prohibited within the buffer.
Well, now I see the nuance there. It's more of a putting the property owners on notice that this is not an area for you to go in and privately pave at a soccer, at a basketball court or at a garage or something. It's really to be left alone. But with that management plan, the city can say, we see value. We want to, put in a trail. Now, to be frank, 50 feet or 30 feet from a creek is a little tight. So in most cases, we're going to stay out of that with a trail anyway. The 50 foot on the floodway, that one I could see us getting we could maybe sneak a trail in spots. but you know, anytime you have moving water over a paved surface, can cause damage, so we try to limit that.
And if you look really quick too in one, I just had it up here. One 72.06, number 3, it says the following structures, practices and activities are permitted within the stream buffer with specific design and maintenance features subject
Okay.
to the review of the city, and then it says road, bridges,
Okay.
paths and
That's the
utilities.
piece I was
Yep.
missing. Thanks,
Yep.
Charlie.
We wrote this a while ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Charlie.
Because that was my next question is, well, should we have it written somewhere explicitly that can be? Okay, so perfect.
I mean, because then we'll have, sanitary sewer easements probably in some of this and crossings.
Okay.
Yep, good catch.
I don't wanna misspeak here necessarily, so correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but I feel too, when it comes down to, first of all, the amount of floodplain that we have within the city is pretty minimal compared to, I think, a
Oh,
lot of
absolutely.
cities.
Yeah.
So we're very fortunate in that sense, but even at the same time too, the amount of streams that we have that would be affected by this, I think is pretty minimal too, so. But that being said, you know, the areas that we do see some problems in are along these specific streams as well too, where we do have, you know, sewer lines that start surfacing from your region and, neighbors who start getting concerned because, you know, when they bought the house, that stream was 5 feet away and it's now closer to me, so. And as long as we can continue to control stormwater in the same way, oh, never mind, sorry. That changed.
Hey, the city can always pay for it. So,
Make a motion to approve. As recommended here.
Get a roll call vote, please.
Harris,
Yes.
Ritchie,
Yes.
Weiss,
Yes.
Boardman,
Yes.
Mormon.
Yes. All right, we can move on to the building permit. Sure, go ahead. What has a question?
Okay, what's next with these things?
City council
Yeah,
and then.
about the great unwashed masses out there that don't know this is going on.
Yeah, so it'll be, so these were all kind of put in chronological order and how they're gonna appear in the code, but I go back to the subdivision because I think that's where a lot of this stuff's gonna come in. And it's gonna be really imperative on us as staff to make sure that developers, when they're asking questions, we start with that pre-application process that was noted in that thing that is not a requirement that we have in our code right now. So now we have put that in our code mainly so we can go through some of this stuff and start meeting with them and explaining to them, this is required, this is required, this is required. So it'll be a lot of outreach in us and, you know, any subdivision that goes in before it gets to you, I promise you, we've had 6, 9, maybe 12 months of conversation with that developer up until that point. So it'll really be imperative on us to make sure that the developers are aware of what this is and what those impacts are.
I'm also concerned about those non-developers
Yeah,
tend to show up in here
yep.
that don't know anything about it until it pinches their toe next door.
Yep. Yeah, that always is a problem. I can only encourage people so much to, you know, hire professional help and stuff like that to get through a process. I think what we tend to see a lot of times in some smaller instances is that I think people will try to get through the path with the spending the least amount of money possible to get a higher return. And in the end, I think that only hinders their process through our process even more. So, you know, with our site planning code, for example, you know, we've been very specific now on that you have to have a registered landscape architect survey or whatever, prepare that. So we're not getting any napkin site plans and things like that. So it's just making sure that people are aware of the regulations, understanding why. And if there's concerns with that, we'll have to handle those when they come by. I mean, we deal with that on a daily basis, so.
This one concerns me a little bit. I don't know how we make it clear because there's a lot of agricultural land in that area. How we make it clear that this is not going to impact existing agricultural land that's used for agricultural purposes,
Mhm.
as long as it stays that way. And it really doesn't come into effect for them unless they're gonna do some kind of housing development.
Yeah. And that's 100% correct.
I don't know
We're
how
not
to get that
regulating.
message
Yeah.
out, but it concerns me a little bit because somebody could look at this and say, oh my God, they're gonna require us to put buffers along our streams and
Hopefully they're watching us on TV, Al.
I'll bet there's not a single farmer out there watching us tonight on TV.
For what it's worth, it's been my experience that most of the farmers that have, a substantial farm operation, it's a business, they know what the rules are and they know we're a right to farm state. And so they understand when they're in the county, they're, have a lot of exemptions and what rules they do have to follow when it comes to other things. And so maybe more of an issue with the Cappuccino Cowboys that have the farmette or the little, 5-acre piece out there. But again, this doesn't impact them unless they were going to do a subdivision.
And I think that's the biggest thing to note too, and go back to the subdivision regulations and what we've done in the past is we are only trying to regulate within our growth priority areas. So yeah, that is a lot of area right there, but a lot of that area, when you look at this map right here,
Yeah.
is not inside our growth priority
Yeah.
area. So
Right.
administratively, if we're following the process that we have in our subdivision code, a lot of this stuff we're not going to be reviewing or requiring. So we could, definitely, there's the opportunity to still make them go through a process if we wanted to, but I think we've kind of set the precedence that if you're not in a growth priority area, we, the city, really aren't too concerned about what happens. Maybe that's the wrong way to put it, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're concerned, but
thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Item 8A, building permit report.
I don't really have much to add to it. If there's any questions, we're sitting pretty good. I think permitting numbers this year in single family dwelling, so. And a few developments that will probably be coming forward here. Any
Same.
questions?
Yeah, I have some questions. Just curious, just to update. The property that's across from the I-Town liquor store,
The horseshoe,
what's going on?
it's in a legal fun zone right now. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah,
Yeah, so let me try to stay as high level as I can on that one right now. So we, the city, are attempting to take a 657A process on that. What that means is we are attempting to acquire the property because we consider it to be abandoned. There's been a process ever since the previous property owner passed away. I think he passed away in 2017. Where it took a long time to get in the hands of the banks, and even one of those pieces of ground isn't even in the bank right now. They've been trying to work together, so if you ever look at it on a map, there is 3 rectangular parcels that go from Highway 92 to the north. And the 2 outside units are on their own parcel, and then the back unit stretches across 3 parcels. US Bank owns the 2 outside parcels, Chase Bank owns the middle parcel. I can keep on going here for a little bit. So it's been a process. We've been, we had to track some people down that were responsible for US Bank that were in New York, and then people responsible for Chase Bank that are in California. Trying to get all of them to play together and realize that this is important has been a challenge. They have contested our acquisition of the property. We kind of hope that they didn't because maybe they just saw that it wasn't that valuable and they would move away from it, but yeah. So anyways, all that being said, it's in court. It's gonna take some time to get what we want. I just gave a presentation at the Iowa League of Cities Nuisance Abatement Conference, which was here in town last Thursday. And we talked about the success we had with the property on Boston that had the fire, where Habitat Humanity is now building a house, and how that process went really fast. But even going really fast took a year and a half to go through. Then I used the horseshoe one as an example of, here we are 7 years later, still trying to figure out what the heck's going on with this property, so.
well, I've had two, that was one of them that people have been asking me about. And the other one is the county-city exchange for the county maintenance yard and the library and.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up, but what, yeah, is a specific question at all, or do you just want me to give a high level? Yeah, so that has been something that, ever since the 6th Street sub area plan was adopted, And Ben Reeves, our city manager, got here. We had been working with the county on what's gonna happen with that piece of ground when you guys leave, because our biggest goal was to make sure that they did not sell it to somebody who wanted to put an industrial site in there. You'll recall not too terribly long ago, we went through a rezoning process on that because we wanted to assure that that did not take place. There was some reasons behind that and I won't get into it, but we've continued to negotiate with the county on this, and as we had those negotiations with it, other things started happening. We have the annex building on the square that they're moving DHS service into there, where there was business owners on the square who had some concern with that. So we started engaging in conversation there. The Masonic Temple building across the street from the county admin building, there's always been some discussion on what's gonna happen with that. So we started talking about that, and then at that point, the county came in and asked us about the library facility and if we'd be interested in exchanging that. So they could move some of their facilities in there, so they were in close proximity to the Justice Center and the admin building, which then had us go back to square one on the 6th Street sub-area plan. And if we're going to redevelop that area of town, can we use something to anchor that development, like a library, for example? And I think that's what really started kicking off some of these discussions on how we move forward with that. And ultimately it came to an agreement between the city and the county to swap those properties that the county has with the library property. So at some point, once we get through the closing on all of that stuff and abstracting and all that's necessary, that land exchange will be finalized.
The city maintenance north of that go away also?
I think the long-term plan will be is in the immediate future, once the county vacates out of there, that we might spread out a little bit our services, because we're in such a small area right now, and just utilize some of that ground. But long-term, yes, we would move our facilities out of there as well too, into a different location. So that entire thing that is owned by the city and the county would be redeveloped.
And it'll take a bond issue in the future.
Depending on exactly how it is decided to be developed, yes.
It's gonna be a terrible loss to see that handsome county building torn down there in their maintenance facility.
Yeah, we'll switch along that trail and you look at all those.
Yeah. You know, that was
Sitting there.
that's what really started triggering some of the conversation, was really because here we are as a city, you know, we've got an opportunity right now with Carlisle and the city of Des Moines working together to finish the Somerset Trail out to Easter Lake, where we're now gonna have a really nice connection from Indianola to Des Moines on the trail network. And yeah, that tends to be one of the first impressions that people may get coming into our town, and it's not necessarily an attractive thing. So again, that kind of is what really triggered the 6th Street sub-area plan, knowing that the county was coming out of there. But no, it's really good. I mean, I know you as the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed that plan, worked really hard on it, but it's a really big win, because it's not too often that you actually get those types of plans to be adopted and then implemented within that little time. And we've got some work to go, obviously, before it's fully implemented, but getting the ground under our control is a giant first step, so.
So once that ground's under control, is that when the process starts on what goes there?
Yeah, yep.
Who starts that?
It would be started by us at some point. I mean, we'll probably kind of put something together where we put an RFP out, or an RFQ out to a developer to possibly put some stuff out there. And I think that's where we need to get creative on, you know, again, the library facility, you know, yeah, that's gonna take some money to build that facility too. And exactly how do we do that? Maybe utilizing some TIF funding out in that area as well too, just because we're redeveloping it. So it's gonna go from a small value to hopefully a larger value at some point.
You think there'll have to be any remediation?
Yeah, 100%. And we've looked
Can you
into,
get
yeah.
brownfield?
Yeah,
money
actually,
from the
so
state?
Emily's done a really good job of looking into some brownfield grants opportunities on that, and
Yeah.
we've had some meetings with some people at the state as well on some opportunity that we have there as well, so.
Cool.
So are you saying there's gonna be possibility of developers developing something privately or for the city?
It would be a private development, so city would own the ground, but eventually I would think that we would transfer it to private development or whatever. Once we come to some sort of an agreement on what that use is going to be, but we, the city, would control it as much as we can to get to the process where things start getting
You have
built.
to try to get it to utilize with the library
Yeah,
intertwined
yeah,
with it.
exactly.
It's interesting.
Good.
So, yeah, no, that one is exciting.
Yeah.
It is.
Excited about
Well, there was, in the last city update, this last week, it was in there.
I think it was in the business record today too.
Was
Was
it?
it? Okay. Thank you. That is pretty neat.
Yeah, and we have a few things going on tonight. What I will do for sure is, I'll have Ben come to our next meeting to kind of give a little bit more detail on some of that stuff too. Ben's been really instrumental on it. I don't want to take any credit for anything he's done because he's worked hard on that. We've had a lot of discussion internally through the process, but he's really been the champion of a lot of that stuff and to get through the process. So I'll see if he's able to come in possibly at your next meeting. He actually might be on vacation then, so it might be a little bit, but we'll get there eventually.
Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
All right.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.